Hi folks, Mr. Ackerman here. Thanks for watching. The topic of this video is how to edit photos in Photoshop when your photos are not JPEGs but rather RAW files. RAW files are not the same as JPEGs. They are uncompressed, meaning they come right out of the camera with all the information that the camera saw. So they're a bit bigger, but they're a lot higher quality, and you can do more when editing them. But you have to edit them a little bit differently. In Photoshop, when you open up a JPEG, you just go right into Photoshop, and as you've seen, we use layers to edit. But with RAW files, it's a bit different. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go and show you some photos that I took, or a photo that I took on New Year's Day. It's this one right here with my son running down the sidewalk to his friends. Notice that the file extension is .cr2. I'm using Canon to shoot, and their RAW files have that file extension, not JPG. If you're using a Nikon, it's going to say .nef, not JPG. So what you do is you go into Photoshop and you go File, Open, and you find the photo that you want. So here it is, and you click Open. And when you open it, you're going to notice things look different than regular Photoshop. We've got the photo here, but there's this completely new window, and this is called the ACR, or Adobe Camera Raw editor. Now, here's how great this is. You don't need to add adjustment layers like we did with JPEGs. Everything is already there for you. For example, exposure, which you're familiar with, is a slider right here, and I can drag this to the right. Things get brighter overall. Left, things get darker overall. If you want to reset it, just highlight the field here and type the number 0, hit enter, and it goes back to where it was. Contrast, increase it, decrease it, change your mind, bring this back to 0. Can't quite get it to 0 because you got shaky fingers. Oh, there we go. You can always just type 0 and hit enter. Highlights is a new one. This targets the bright areas of the photo only and makes them even brighter or darker. Okay? Over here, hit 0, back to where we started. Shadows targets only the dark areas and makes them brighter or darker, while leaving everything else the same. Whites is kind of like highlights. You can play with that on your own. Blacks is a cool one. This one takes your dark tones, your darkest tones, and if you slide it to the right, it brightens them. We don't usually do that. What I like to do a lot of times is to darken them, and then you get these nice rich shadows in your photo. Great for contrast. Reset that. Here's one that's also new, clarity. Kind of like contrast, but a little more aggressive. Fun to play with. Or if you go the other way, it kind of gives a soft, dreamy, cloudy look to a photo. So you can enjoy playing with clarity. Don't go overboard. If you go too far, things start to look kind of silly, I think. But again, for creative effect, sure, why not? Dehaze is similar to clarity, but it goes even more aggressive, and you might like the results. It's up to you. Again, experiment, but don't go too far overboard. Don't get carried away. Vibrance and saturation, you know what those are, so I'm going to leave them alone. Here's a new one, temperature. We've talked about the temperature of a photo, or the colors rather, and if you move that to the right, things get what we call warmer, a little more yellow and orange. If you move it to the left, they get cooler, a little more blue. So what mood do you want to convey in a photo? Decide on that and then move this accordingly. The tint is related to temperature. We often kind of move them together. If your photo is too green, then move toward the magenta. If it's too magenta, move it toward the green. If you don't know which one to do, then maybe that means it's fine the way it was. You can always reset this to 0, or here's what I like to try sometimes. Just go back to the presets, as shot, or experiment with automatic, daylight, cloudy, and so on. See what that does. Okay? Maybe you'll find a preset that works for you, and then you're good to go. Last thing on this frame here, or on this window. Black and white, always lots of fun. Converts the photo just in a basic way, but then you play with your sliders as we have in the past, and you make it the style that you want. Okay? Let's check out a few other things. This tab over here is your tone curve. This is curves when we're in regular Photoshop. You're used to it. Click on point over here, and then click and drag if you want, as we have in the past, or use the custom presets. It's up to you. This tab here, sharpening, we often add a little bit of sharpening to a photo, but not too much, otherwise it can get pretty ridiculous. If you go too far overboard with these sliders, your photo, see what's happening down here? It's starting to look really pixelated. So don't do that. Just if you ever need to reset, you can click here and you can hit Camera Raw defaults, and that'll reset everything. Okay. There's also noise reduction for very high ISO noisy photos. Again, if we need to do it, we might move the slider a little bit to the right. Here's one that's fun. Luminance or brightness of specific colors. Look at my daughter's jacket here. It's magenta, right? Suppose I want to brighten just the magenta. So I go luminance, magenta, and there goes her jacket getting brighter, and also her friend's boots, which are the same color. Here's my son's pant leg with blue. What happens when I go brighter on the blue? You see what's happening? It's the only blue thing in the photo, or one of the only things, so it's getting brighter. Maybe I want to saturate that blue as well. Did you see the change that was happening there? There's also some blue light in the background, so it's changing. Same with the magenta of my daughter's jacket. And finally the hue, the actual type of blue or magenta or whatever other color. You can experiment with those to great creative effect. Split toning is something different. I'm going to leave that to you to experiment with, but I don't really talk about it too much, and I don't often do it. It's a little more advanced. Lens corrections, it's never a bad idea to click Enable Profile Corrections. This lets Photoshop say, hey, I know what camera and lens, well actually what lens you were using, and I'm going to apply some known corrections to that to make things more accurate, true to life. The grain slider under the Effects panel, kind of nice in black and white, but we're not going to talk about it too much here. I'm keeping this simple. Vignetting, we've talked about that, just darkening around the edges a little bit to concentrate the viewer's attention into the middle. Don't go overboard, starts to look ridiculous. You know, sometimes 10 or 15, maybe 20 points to the negative side looks nice. These other three sliders, not going to talk about them, leave them alone. Let's go back to the basic panel. So let's say that I decided to brighten for whatever reason and increase contrast, bring down the highlights a bit, darken and make the black tones richer, increase the clarity, and maybe I'm also going to convert to black and white, let's say, and I'm going to go for, let's go into effects. I'm going to do post-crop vignetting. Let's say for whatever reason this is what I decided on doing. I want to see, is this better than in the beginning? Go down to this little button here and click the before and after. It'll show you what you've done. Go into this pane here. It'll show you what you've done. Decide if you like it. Maybe you think, you know what, I don't really like this at all. What was I thinking? So you want to reset everything. Go over here and hit Camera Raw defaults, and everything goes back to the way you started. Okay? Of course, you can always hit Control-Z to go back a step like you normally do on a computer. Let me show you a few other things before we move on. Up at the top here are some tools that you can look at, but the one I want to point out to you, which is kind of important, one is the adjustment brush. If you click on this, you see this big circular thing. So here's what we're going to do. We're first of all going to set what we want this thing to do. I want to darken some areas in the photo that I think are too bright. Not the whole photo, just certain parts. So I'm going to drop the exposure by a few points. And the other thing I want to do is show you that as I click here, do you see how it's kind of getting darker? Drop the exposure a bit. Now you can see a little bit better. If I thought the middle was too big, then I can just kind of paint in some darkness. I'm clicking and dragging here, and only certain parts are getting darker. If you click mask down here, then you can see where that was happening. Okay? If you don't like what you did, click on this little pin here and hit delete. If you want to make the brush size a little bit smaller, then you can scroll down here. Here's where the size was. So slide that down. See how it's becoming smaller? Or if you want to see exactly in real time how it's becoming smaller, use the square bracket keys beside the letter P on your keyboard. Square bracket to the left goes smaller, square bracket to the right gets bigger. Feathering is just the amount of sort of edging and softening on the side of your brush. So you can play around with that, and you can basically do anything to any area of the photo by making it darker or brighter, changing the contrast, making the black tones even darker and making them richer, and so on and so forth. There's a lot you can do with that. Another one that I'd like to look at is spot removal over here. This one's great. Let's say there's something in the photo that you want to get rid of. Instead of cloning it out in Photoshop with layers, here's something you can do. Let's say for whatever reason I decided I don't like this little leaf or whatever it is on the sidewalk. So I select a size for the brush that I want. Remember, you do it with square brackets, the key to the right of the letter P. Get it to just the right size. Okay. Set this to clone over here, and then click. And it's going to give you red is what you just clicked on, and green is what you want to copy into there. See what I'm doing? I'm cloning from green to red. Now I don't want my son's shoe to appear there, I just want a clean piece of sidewalk because I decided I didn't like that little leaf that was there. Once you've got it, hit the preview button before and after and decide, yeah, that's great, that's what I like. There's not much I would clone out of this photo anyway. It's not a great example for cloning, but now you know how to use it. And that's about it. To get you back to the regular adjustment panels, you want to go to this Targeted Adjustment tool, and then all of these things reappear. So now, once you're happy with your photo, you're going to open it in regular Photoshop. Now, I know you want to click this button, Open Image, but don't. First, hit the Shift key. See what's happening? It's changing from Open Image to Open Object. Now, if you open Image like this, you will get an image in Photoshop, but you can never go back and change the settings that you set here. If you do Shift and then click, so you open Object, let's watch what happens. It opens in Photoshop, and now it doesn't say background layer, it just says image, and there's this funny little box within a box here. That's what's called an object, smart object. So we're going to double click, and it opens us back in Camera Raw so that we can make further adjustments if we need. If I had opened this as just a regular image, you can't go back. Once you've opened it as an object, now it's safe to make any changes that you want. Click OK, have it in Photoshop, change your mind, double click, go back, make further adjustments, click OK, and so on. Last thing, you're in Photoshop now. You see this is not quite a JPEG. We want to File, Save As a JPEG, because that's what you got to use if you want to put it on your website, for example, or maybe you want to send it to someone to display, just to show them a photo that you took. You don't want to send them a huge file. So we can save as a JPEG as usual. None of that has changed. I'm not going to save it right now. When you are done, though, and you want to save this as an object, you can just click the regular save, and it'll be a PSD. And you can go OK, maximize compatibility, yes. And if you ever open that up again, then you'll be able to go back into Camera Raw. So let's see what it did. There it is as a PSD. And by the way, you'll notice there's a new file up here with the same number, 2882, but XMP. An XMP file is actually all the information about all the changes that I just made. That file has to tag along with this every time you open it if you want to keep the adjustments that we made in Adobe Camera Raw. If you delete this or you move this to another folder, then you'll just be opening it up and starting all over again. Okay, so that's a basic intro to Adobe Camera Raw. Hope you found this video helpful. Thanks very much and have yourselves a great day.